My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. I'm your host, Rick Clemons, but you all know that, and I'm excited to have you here. And just a quick reminder before we dive in today, don't forget to come join us over on Facebook in the 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk community, where the conversations continue. And today I feel I'm going to just say kind of blessed to have this guest on with us because we haven't addressed a lot of this. We've talked about lots of faith and being gay and all this stuff, but I'm trying to remember over all the years I've done podcasts, I think I've only had one or two conversations with someone in the Jewish community at an in-depth level about how you manage that and being gay or being bi or trans, whatever it is. And I love that Rabbi Steven Greenberg is here today to have this conversation with us. He has been, well, I'm going to let him tell some of the stories, but he has written a book called Wrestling with God and Men, Homosexuality in the Jewish Traditions. And he was also featured in a little movie. I'll let him talk about that. But I'm also going to invite him to talk about his journey. And then we want to have a really powerful conversation about what does authenticity look like as humans, as sexual beings, as gender, because I think sometimes there's some confusion as to what that truly looks like. So Rabbi Steven Greenberg, thank you so much for being here and joining me and being willing to share, your perspectives with my audience. I sure appreciate it, Steve.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rick.
Yeah. So you are a gay Jewish rabbi. Let's start. I don't know why it's no anomaly to me. I'm like, all my Jewish friends that are gay, like, yeah, it just happened, it's a whole different world. But I would love to weigh in on this and kind of get like, okay, what is that like for you, Steve, as a husband, a father, all this sort of stuff?
Well, first look, in the end, for your audience, I'm sure the possibility of a queer priest is not surprising to people.
Right.
Moreover, it's actually interesting that I think queer people are often drawn toward religious frameworks. I find that because you have to ask yourself at an early stage, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Why are my feelings like this? You end up becoming sometimes more introspective than you might otherwise. And so I actually find that the intersection of queer life and religious striving and searching is actually pretty common.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, that's a good way to begin to just say that I grew up not an Orthodox. My mother is a Holocaust survivor. She met my dad in high school. They fell in love and we moved to Columbus, Ohio. And there I accidentally found myself walking into an Orthodox synagogue at the age of 15. Wow. And being swept into that community. The English rabbi who was the head of the congregation invited me to his home for a Sabbath meal. And basically I brought my friends, and slowly this group of fairly liberal Jews in Columbus, Ohio had a group of their teenagers who were being pulled into much more traditional frames. And I kind of remember it being very exciting, and it drove me to decide to get educated in New York City at Yeshiva University, which is a mix of a yeshiva and a university. And that's when struggling with my inner life over a period of a number of years, I had to just face the fact that I was attracted to guys, and what was I going to do about it? So those are other stories. I'm happy to those as well.
But it is interesting because I feel similar in different ways around this, that I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, and there was a, crossroads where I'm like, wait, this faith isn't supporting me in the ways that I want, but there's still tentacles of it that I do. I mean, Seventh-day Adventists, worship on the Sabbath as well. They sat from Friday night to Saturday evening. That's considered the Sabbath. And I kind of tie into that, belief system. There's a lot of principles I tie into that. But after I came out twice, which everybody knows who's listened to this. I would say even now in present day, I'm much more on a spiritual quest. And there's times I'm like, could I find a faith that would fulfill me in some ways? I'm very much a spiritual person. I believe in something greater than myself. I don't believe I just exist here. And maybe it's the times, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, trying to figure this all out. But I think your point is really well taken, that sometimes that coming out process drives us to the deeper introspection and to, is this all there is there's got to be something more. And I've had many conversations with many gay people or LGBTQ people where that finding that connection through faith, church, whatever it might be for them, has actually been part of their saving themselves and being able to move on. And I'm sure you've experienced that too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know you do a lot of that kind of work with Eshel, right? I mean, you're really working within that space to help people navigate.
Exactly. I mean, I would say that the process of my own coming out, first to family, which was hard in its own right, because my mother expected me to revive the destroyed family in Europe, and here I was, she thought now a rabbi, and now
right.
What's a gay rabbi? So
right.
It was challenging, but I would say that the real the story that tells this moment of, and I think we all have moments like this, coming out is like an onion, onion skin. You come out repeatedly in different ways, in different contexts for many years, right? But there was this coming out to the self is actually sometimes it's the beginning, even saying to yourself, I am gay, being able to really say that to yourself puts you, if you've been given only futures that are straight, that are good, and all the gay ones are really bad, you've never been provided with a model for a good gay adult future. And in the 70s, that was surely true.
Absolutely.
So standing at the edge of a cliff is where you find yourself when you say you're gay, and you got to figure out what happens next. So this moment, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this Jewish tradition that on Yom Kippur, we fast all day. It's the Day of Atonement.
Yep.
And it's the day that the verses in Leviticus are read.
The
verse in Leviticus, the clobber verse that, and with a male you shall not lie, the lyings of a woman, it's an abomination. It's read on that day. And on that day, I decided I was going to get called up to the Torah to be there for that reading. It was a very challenging, self-challenging thing to do. I was walking in to the text that had been tormenting me for 10 years. And at the moment when that happened, I realized that the reason this text is misinterpreted is because the people who interpret it have never heard our stories, my story, our stories. And if they had, who knows what they would have said. And I began to feel like it was my job to figure out how to reconcile the deep spiritual longing that so many of us feel with a text that no doubt had been interpreted without our narratives on the table. And so that's been my job. And on some level, the work of Eshel is to carry that in two ways into the community. One, to encourage queer people that their experience is a human one, and it is not a corruption of spirit or an ugliness of character or an illness. It is
Mm,
just the way a very wild and creative God has made the world.
mm.
So the first task is to say, Lord,
You made
there's
me. You
there's
made
a
this is
blessing we say,
yeah.
you know, son and kids know that you have made me according to your will. Every morning we say this.
Mm,
It's the blessing actually that women say every morning, and and now I think queer people and maybe even everyone should say that, Lord, thank you for making me in this unique and utterly, kind of single frame. Like every human being is literally the only one that will ever live like that.
mm,
So
mm.
God cherishes us all. If that's the case, then this
Right.
tradition needs to be read differently.
Steve, I think you will love this story. And I think I shared it maybe one other time on this podcast, but I was having a conversation with somebody in my world. I'm going to try to do this without revealing a whole lot. And they simply can't, they have a queer person in their life, a gay, I don't know, brother-in-law or something like that. So I can tell they're not 100% behind it. They're very fundamental evangelical kind of Christian sort, but they just cannot wrap their head around transgender non-binary. And I remember this conversation, and the thing this person said is, well, God didn't make any mistakes. And that was like one of those, okay, here's my moment. Here is my moment. And I said, you are absolutely right. He didn't make a mistake with anybody who's transgender or non-binary or queer. He made them just exactly as they are. And they could not handle that. I'm like, you open the door. I'm not trying to be argumentative or combative or anything, but you kind of shot yourself in the foot with that statement, because that's exactly the way I see it. This is the way God made it. So let it be, and I love that that's, as I started to look at what you do with Eshel and your group and everything, I love that we're going to get into the more challenging piece of that. It's hard in anybody's world. But when you start to go into the deeper layers of any faith, and especially as you get to the more Orthodox Jewish stuff, this is where it's really challenging. And for everybody listening, I'm going to share that Steve and I had a conversation about this. And I shared that I have coached a couple of Jewish Orthodox people. And it was at best eye-opening for me and challenging, but to a point where I was so glad where we landed for them. And that's the critical terms here, folks. Landed for them. That they walked away from that being at peace as best as they could in that moment with where their journey has taken them. And I think that's kind of what you're doing with Eshel in your own work is let's bring people to their journey in their own way and not in the quote, here's how it has to be, right?
Well, so you've hit it right on the head, and I just want to explain like it for your audience. So the Orthodox Jewish community is the most traditional of the denominations.
Yeah.
And we as an organization work to support queer Jews who, Orthodox Jews who discover themselves to be queer. We work with their families, we work with their parents, we work with their rabbis, and we work with allies in order to support them to both discover that they can retain their religious worlds, but not abandon themselves, and the other way around. They don't have to choose between their religious journey and their inner experience of themselves as full and decent human beings who just want love and intimacy and companionship. And so, we work with 280 some Orthodox synagogues. Now, there are many more Orthodox synagogues like that have yet to, engage. We have yet to engage. It's a slow process, and clearly we've gotten the most. The people that we engage tend to be on the most willing to have those conversations.
Sure, which is
But
typical in most faiths, quite
of
honestly.
those people, we have about 70 congregations across the U.S. that are at least moderately welcoming of queer people and of gay couples. And so we are moving the needle slowly, both with the rabbinic community as well with schools, with a new initiative, and with and with parents who, we discovered this early on, that queer people are not always the best advocates
Mm-mm.
because the Orthodox community, once you're out, doesn't quite know what to do with you. But their parents who remain Orthodox, they are in those communities, they can mobilize the leadership of the Orthodox community. And so
Mhm.
we have a national retreat for parents. It's coming up May 11th through 13th in Baltimore. And it's an amazing engagement so that we get parents on board in a way that support each other, but also mobilize them to really make a difference in the larger Jewish community.
I love that. And it's interesting, Steve, because it's actually very similar to what I think it was Jean Manford who started PFLAG years ago. And she was a mother of a queer child who said, and she marched at Stonewall, all this sort of stuff. She knew the only way, well, I'm not going to say the only way, but one of the most amazing ways to start to help the community was to mobilize as allies and to really start to go little by little, little by little, little by little. And in your story, that's what I picked up on. It's like, when you said the number 280, and then out of that 70, I think is the number you said of, somewhat moderate welcoming, that's a pretty big number when you really think about it. You take 70 out of 280, that's what, 40%, 35% of the. I wish more faiths could do that, because I think that's where the mobilization comes. That's where the acceptance comes. That's where the allowing people to fall in alignment in the best way that they can with themselves, or in that, lovely word that we all like to throw around so much, authenticity. I will never tell anybody, oh, to be authentically gay, you have to do this. I don't think there's one size fits all in anything about being queer under whatever the umbrella is, because I think you have to come into it in your own way. So I'm going to share a little bit with this around the one Orthodox person I did work with. He was in pain. I mean, he was literally in pain over this. And where we got him to was an acceptance of who he is while loving his faith and still while loving his family and his wife. And he came to a space where he could accept that. Prior to that, he couldn't accept that all of those could somewhat balance to some degree. When we got done, I said, how do you feel given that we spent, 4 months, I don't know, maybe it was 6 months with him. I don't remember. It's been a while back. That you've now come to a place of alignment as best as you can for where you are right now. And he said, I feel more at peace than I've felt in 20 years. I still know there's work to do. And he was good stopping right there. And I don't know what happened with him. We stayed in touch for a little bit. I know he still continued to be himself, but it's quite a journey when you can get somebody to at least to some of the acceptance and the alignment for themselves versus here's how you have to show up. Right. So I'm curious, if you were in that space, Steve, where's the next step you would, or how would you approach it with them? Because again, as leaders and coaches and rabbis, people come to us for a lot of stuff, but I will never want to say to somebody, oh, you have to do this. You have to do this. We engage people on this journey in so many different places. So we gauge, there are people who are searching for a more coherent religious frame, and so they're not Orthodox, and they come to us because they want more tradition. They're totally self-accepting. We have or other people who come to us from the Orthodox community who still are deeply closeted and feel a lot of shame. We have people who come to us who are intellectually motivated and want to become teachers in this process and want to kind of pull together. So we have lesbians who are studying Talmud, in all kinds of places in order to become, leaders in communities of all kinds. So the process of authenticity is not, it doesn't have a single answer. Yep. Or a destination. I don't believe there's a destination.
For some people, Authenticity will be self-acceptance, but the recognition that they owe it to their wife and their 6 kids not to walk away. And for
Mhm.
others, they'll recognize that they simply can't function effectively, and they're better parents and might even be a better friend to a spouse after a divorce. And that the decision on that is not anyone else's to make.
Nope.
It's theirs to make. And so authenticity ends up becoming working with them to figure out where the best outcome
Yeah,
for everyone they love and care about, including themselves, where that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Let me
All
just
right.
say that in so I was quickly looking through my papers. The parents' retreat that I mentioned
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
May 8th to May 11th, and not
Okay.
May 11th to May 13th.
Okay. So May 8th through the 11th. And they can find out information on the website, right? For that?
Correct.
Okay. Because
Correct.
we're gonna have that link in their stuff. But I think this is so amazing because we can come, and you and I both okay, so we both came out, we had the parental stuff. I mean, mine went on for years until the acceptance finally got there. There's still every once in a while I kind of question if we're right at there still, but my parents are in their 80s now, so it's like let them
Yeah.
be who they are at this point. But it's such a key critical space for most people, that
Yeah.
family embracement. And there's where I always love the words guilt and shame. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, well, guilt is you did something wrong, so you feel guilty about it. Shame is you are something wrong. There's something wrong with you. And
It's nice to.
unfortunately, both of those things show up when somebody comes out, especially if there's a deep faith-based component to this. There's shame, like, oh, you're bad. And then there's oh, you had sex with a man. Oh, you did something wrong. And to balance those two things out is such a journey with people. And if that parental space or familial space isn't accepting, this can make the journey even
So hard.
deeper and so
So
hard.
hard.
Yeah.
Well, for many of us, God who grew up in faith, God starts as a tormentor and ends as a comforter.
Mm-hmm.
And that move is one which many I've walked with many gay people through that frame, that they see God as challenging and accusing them in the beginning of their process, because that's what they're told.
Yeah.
And in the exploration and the self-acceptance, they recognize that God knows them and loves them as they are, and that it's the clergy and the systems around them that are slow to pick up on the news.
Yeah.
And so that can be a help. In other words, it might actually be that religious convictions that are deep are actually they begin to push in the other direction. They begin to
Mm-hmm.
kind of confirm us rather than undermine us. And I think that's what many of the people at Eshel are hungering for, and many find in.
Well, I think many people just hunger for that, period. I mean, it's just, I mean, as a human race, we hunger for that. But when you
Yeah.
add these components of being LGBTQ plus, there's just this, I just want to be embraced. I just want to be accepted, which self-acceptance is the beginning. I loved when you brought that up, because I think so many of us struggle with that acceptance piece. But as soon as we accept ourselves, yes, the journey doesn't stop. It actually can become a little more scary because now we're going to reveal it to the world. It's always interesting when the reveal happens and somebody's family says, oh yeah, we knew, we are just waiting for you, you know? So that's a whole nother, like, well, why didn't you say something? We could have avoided so many things. Right.
Right.
But I think, even as I do this, show, this podcast, it's always interesting to see that guys in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, that like a conversation like this today is probably sparking some, oh yeah, I'm still not 100% there. And guys, I just want to invite you. I don't think we're ever 100% there. There's going to be something that happens today in your world after listening to this, it's like, oh, there's the pebble in the shoe from like, I'm still feeling some shame around being gay. Even if you've been out for 20, 30 years, something's going to hit. It may not hit to the level it used to,
Right.
but there's
Right.
that little thing. I say every day, there isn't a day that goes by unless I just don't leave the house. But even when I don't leave the house, that I don't come out. I mean, I coach people from all over the globe, and my other work, there's times I'm like, well, what did you speak on? Okay, here we go. Well, I speak on LGBTQ topics and helping people be authentically who they are. And so there's a coming out right there. And I think this is the beauty of the work we are privileged to get to do, Steve, is to stand beside, walk with those who come to us for guidance,
Right.
and allow them to uncover what's true for them. Years ago, I was coaching one of my clients who's now, he's getting married this summer. When he first came to do the work, he wasn't like 100% accepting that he was gay. He was probably more like, I'm experimenting, which is really what he was. And I loved what he said. He goes, I said, well, if somebody asks you what's going on in that world, what would you say? He goes, well, I'm currently just dating a guy. I'm currently just dating a guy. And that's as far as he wanted to take. He wasn't going to say he was gay. He was like, I'm just currently doing this. And he goes, is that weird? I'm like, it's not for me to determine if it's weird. If that's what works for you, then you need to live by your ability to do that. And it was such a springboard for him, because that was the door that finally opened. Oh, you mean I can be whatever you want to call it at that moment? I can be this, and that's okay. I'm like, you're the one who gets to determine if okay. Now, if you let other people say it's not okay, then there's a whole nother bit of work we do around that. But I think it's really powerful. And I'm sure you've seen this over and over again, like that, walking into that beautiful space of, oh, this is okay. This is my truth for now. Could shift, or it could build upon that truth. And then it gives you even more confidence to keep going on the journey.
Right. Right. Listen, these journeys are slow and plodding, and they tend not to even finish. I'm not so sure that they're ever completely done. I just want to put out there also that a person who never feels guilt for anything in their lives is probably a person who's not really doing much introspection.
Yep.
So I think it's okay to recognize that we're always going to be struggling with either things not falling short in our lives, in our relationships, and in our families, and in ourselves. The real challenge is actually whether or not you stick with it and you keep working toward the goals that set you out in the first place on this larger journey. And I can say that if you look at the success of Eshel's work over the past 10 years, what's really remarkable is when you give leadership, religious leadership, the opportunity to meet us, to engage with us, to hear our stories, to kind of engage on a personal level, a lot of the ideological hesitations begin to dissolve, and they begin to also look for the ways of reinterpretation and reimagination that are available to them. And I've seen rabbis in the midst of a single conversation, like you see the light bulb go on inside them, and they recognize, oh, this is a human reality. We have to provide. This is the thing. We have principals in schools who they'll be nice to queer kids in the school, but they will not teach anything having to do with same-sex marriage or commitment or engagement. And I say to them, look, you cannot be credible as a religious leader if you offer a adult future of love and companionship to everybody else and not us.
And not to them.
And so when I said that, this guy goes, oh, like, is that what I'm not? Yes, you are not offering them a vision of a good adult life. And in the absence of that, they're either going to do one of two things. They're going to mess somebody else's life up.
Yep.
And their own, or they're going to walk away from your tradition that is denying them a reasonably loving and
Yep.
imperfect and wonderful adult life.
Yep. I say the same thing all the time, Steve. I mean, and given the current states of politics and everything in the world, especially in the US, I hate to say it, but all these things that are coming towards so far, mostly the transgender community, but it's not far behind, that this is going to lead to people hiding in the closets again and lives getting hurt years down the road. I loved my wife. I cared so much about her. I'm very blessed to have, two beautiful children out of that whole experience. I probably would not have been able to experience that in the way I have now. I'm sure I would have been one of those guys like, yeah, I want to have children. But every time I see these things happening, I'm like, I don't think you all realize the ramifications of what you're doing. You are actually causing people to go hurt people in the future. You can't deny who you are. You just can't. And it's unfortunate because I think we're starting to create the same snowball, and we already see people hiding. I mean, I was like, do I even want to continue being a voice out there? And I'm like, absolutely I do, because you know what? I'm not going to go hide. I refuse to go hide. But I know I've already had some guys that were going to work with me, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm not going to come out of the closet yet. Which to that I said, then let's not, but let's get you at peace with yourself, whatever that looks like.
Right. Right.
But
I mean, part of the difficulty in our community is one which, I think it's in many different worlds, but in our world in particular, Abram and Sarah are promised continuity in the covenant through children. Yep. Jesus makes disciples, Abram and Sarah make a baby.
Yep.
So it's very hard for Jewish communal members to conceive of a framework that doesn't propel reproduction in that way. I think that I recognize that often queer people are struggling without, articulating it clearly, how queer love makes it more complicated, not impossible at all, but more complicated to belong to that familial frame with parenting. And I think that we need to provide, and we're working on this, to provide opportunities for people at younger ages to find spouses that are same sex and to figure out how to make that family happen if that's what they want. So I've been doing weddings for the past 10 years for LGBTQ couples. And recently, just a couple I married 3 years ago already have 4 kids.
Wow.
So the desire to be part, and by the way, I want to make it clear, one can contribute to the world in other ways. There are other ways of having continuity. It's basically the covenant of Israel is, God says to Abram, I want you to commit to a world you will never see, to make it better and more beautiful and more just and more loving. And it's going to be in the future, and you're going to be here for many generations to do it. There are ways to commit to a future you will never see, even if you're not a parent. A parent is a great way to do it with kids, but the notion that our lives can mean something to future generations is human and necessary. It's not only about my satisfaction. It's about my commitment to belong to a movement that feels like my life mattered. And mattering is so important to all of us. And figuring out how you weave that in with love and companionship is really important for queer communities and individuals to get.
And I think part of that is it can be a commitment to, a healthier planet. It can be a commitment to human rights. It can be a commitment to letting somebody, if somebody doesn't want to be a parent, let them not be that, because their energy might be better spent not being a parent and doing other things.
Correct. The Talmud says that if you can be a teacher, and that's like being a parent. Here's the thing, you can care for a generation that will go beyond you, even if you are not bringing them into life. But my point is that the desire for that
absolutely
really strong, and we ought to nourish it. We ought to help queer people figure out how do they build not only loving lives, but lives that are meaningful and contributive in ways that they value as well.
And I think it's interesting too, given that, most of my listeners are going to be, I always say they're 40 plus, but then I get emails from, younger queer people who are like, I listened to this and I probably shouldn't because I'm not 40. I'm like, listen to it, please listen, because in a way, what we're doing here with these conversations is actually paving the way for the future as you're talking about it. Like the more we have these conversations and people get insight to how this is done, it's such a powerful thing. And so many gay men, and I'm trying not to generalize here, but I'm going to say a lot of gay men are very, very frustrated in the loneliness space and all these sort of things. And as a community, how can we make that future brighter for each other? Let's start being more embracing of one another. Let's start being more accepting. Okay, if you're not into black men, that's okay. That's totally cool. But don't knock them, If you're not into femme guys, cool. But you don't have to take them down. And that's how we pave the way to a better future as a community. And I'm going to go for the big one here because I've had such an amazing conversation with Rabbi Steve here. If somebody chooses to go and be part of a faith because they're queer, let them, because that's what's fulfilling them in their way. If that's not for you, then don't do it. It's like, if you don't want an abortion, then don't get an abortion. That's for you to decide. But if somebody wants to embrace a faith like Judaism or Catholicism or whatever it is, or maybe it's, one of the more other churches that's really super warm and embracing, don't knock them because that's what's fulfilling them. Let them go be who they choose to be in the world, because that's what we all wanted as queer people, is to just let us be. So what's one of the lessons you feel like you've learned most about yourself, Steve, as this has all continued to evolve for you? And I know that's a big question. We could answer that. That could be a whole show in and of itself, but what's something you've really learned most about yourself by just embracing this and stepping into being a leader in this way as a queer rabbi?
What have I learned about myself? I guess the most important thing I've learned about myself is that that the personal and the communal and the theological are all they're all they're all one cholent. In Jewish tradition, we make this stew, which has vegetables and meat and barley and beans. And life does not, the orders of things they get mixed up. And the truth is that the way we treat our spouse, the way we deal with friends, the way we think of our roles in the larger society and communities, these are all interconnected. And I've learned that my work at Eshel is not unrelated to all the other things I do in my life that I care about. We're all here to figure out how we embrace each other and figure out how we can, make the world a better place. And that happens in the littlest of relationships, meaning reminding myself to call a friend who's been depressed and not forget him, and deliver the meal to the person who just delivered a baby, even though I have no relationship, but the synagogue said they need some food, and everything is all connected. That's all.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And it's such an interesting thing. You can't just put your gay self and say, okay, that's this. And I've always said, my gay self is just a part of all the rest of me. It's all in there, every bit of it. There's no separating.
There's no piece of me that isn't gay.
Right.
And yet it's not the first thing that necessarily is on my mind all the time.
No, me either. So, well, I have so enjoyed this conversation, Steve. And again, the retreat for parents is coming up May 8th through the 11th. Folks, I just went online. I could find it. There's so many good resources on eshelonline.org. I would encourage you to go explore. If you know some people you think that it might be helpful for, encourage them to check it out, because every resource is a resource that gets us to a brighter future. And I think, Steve, you laid that out really nicely today. So I'm so appreciative of your time, your words, the way you're showing up in the world doing what you do by just being yourself and not making it, oh, yes, I'm a, gay rabbi. That's the first thing people need to know. You're a person, you're a human who happens to be a rabbi, who actually happens to be gay, who happens to be a parent. All of these things, they're just the intersectionality of everything that makes Steve Steve. So again, Rabbi Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rick. I just wanted to say one other thing, and that is,
Yes,
that people should know that if they want to be in touch, either with Eshel or with me personally, I'm Steve at eshelonline.org. And you can connect to Eshel at info@eshelonline.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts and involve you if you have any reason to be involved. My book, Wrestling with God and Men, is available.
Yeah, we didn't even really touch on that a whole lot, but no, it's there's so much good stuff there, and I love that this is just another doorway. Sometimes people are like, there's nobody like me. Oh yeah, there are. There's a lot of people like you, and finding the door that works best for you. I always say, I can't work with everybody. Steve can't work with everybody, but you're going to find where you can work with Rick. You may not be able to work with Steve. Steve may, not be able to work with Steve. You work with me. There's so many beautiful doorways, but sometimes just the exposure like this to saying, oh, here's a doorway you didn't know about. And I think echelonline.org is a really great space for anybody who, go figure it out. Even if you're like, I don't know, I'm trying to find a faith that I feel really supports me. Maybe you need to go explore what the Jewish faith could do for you. So again, Steve, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you.
It was a pleasure.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit for 40 Plus. Screwed up gay men make bold moves, where size doesn't matter. Without we drop our bullshit. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus. Gay men, gay live life where the conversations continue. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where the conversations continue.